Welcome to PHP Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 325.
Yeah, the last episode of 2022.
And are we dropping this today?
Yeah, so we're recording pretty late. Normally on Wednesdays, we've pre-recorded the episode like a day or so before. Sometimes a little bit more than that even, so that we're ready to make sure it's up. We had some stuff come up. As you guys know, I was sick. We had some other things happen. And so we're recording pretty late. But we were set on the fact that we were going to produce content even through this holiday season. So here we are. If you're watching this late on Wednesday night, or if you're listening to it, thanks for being patient as it was coming up, but we got it up.
I just got to say, watch out for the pesto pizza. So quick story. My son has no allergies. We went out to eat today, ate some pesto pizza. Next thing you know, we're in the ER. He's all good though. He's all good.
Yeah,
but
anaphylactic shock, right?
No. He didn't go into anaphylactic shock, but
right. But I mean, his tongue was swollen.
It looked crazy. It looked crazy. So this is why we're dropping the episode late. But as we promised, we're gonna be dropping these episodes even during this time. And I almost thought like, hey, let's move on by. But I wanted to share some of this. I wanted to talk about some of this. So what we're doing in this episode is talking about reselling highlights of 2022. So we'll share some of our highlights, what we learned, looking forward. So do you want to start us off?
Sure. One of my big experiences this year, it's kind of been a low year for me as far as sourcing. I've had so much going on, but I was lucky enough to see one day that there was a church rummage sale. Now, my experience with church rummage sales are sometimes they're amazing because they're trying to get rid of stuff pretty cheap. But a lot of times you get to them and people have just donated their junk, right?
Yeah.
And this was a little bit bigger of like a mega church one. And as I go in there, I went into like 3 different rooms and didn't really find anything super valuable. I wasn't going to spend a lot of time in clothes, so I put that off for last, and I went into the toys. Sometimes you can get lucky and find some, unique antique toys. Found something for my son. I'm like, well, if nothing else, I got this. And I walk into a room of the electronics. Now, you know how electronics are, but it looked like a thrift store as far as just like random junk, like the random, kitchen stuff, and then like
I don't even want to look sometimes.
Some lights and just random stuff. But then I see in the corner, there was like, what drew my attention first were like sound equipment looking things. And I used to run a soundboard back when I was in middle school for a church that I went to. So like I recognized that, and I walk over and I start looking and I see big cameras, like big camcorder cameras, professional quality ones, big Canon ones. And I knew they were Canon because I saw on the lens a red line going around the lens. And if you're not familiar with cameras, you don't do a lot. If you find a Canon camera lens and it's got a red like ring around the front, that's Canon L glass. And now they have something else. I think it's called S glass. I could be wrong, but the L glass at the time and even to this day is one of the best quality lenses that you can get. And they wanted, I want to say it was $55 each for these. And so there was 3 of them for $55 each, 3 cameras. And my thought was, I'm going to be able to sell these lenses. Now, unfortunately, these weren't lenses that can go on a DSLR. If these were lenses that can go on a DSLR, I knew I'd be able to sell them for like $800 to $1,000 a piece. Wow. But because it was specific to this type of camera, I knew it wouldn't be quite as much, but I knew I'd for sure make a lot more than $55. So I look up the lenses first. Sure enough, they're going for several hundred. And I'm like, this is a deal, right? So I picked up all 3 of them. And man, I tell you what, as I'm like leaving that place, like this is one of the lessons I learned. I always bring a bag, the IKEA bag, and I put a box in it to make it more rigid. So always have something like that, but it wasn't big enough for all 3 of these cameras.
That's a tip right there. I've never even thought about doing that. I've seen people do that, but I never thought about that.
Yeah, put a box inside that's about the same dimensions as the IKEA bag, and it makes it like rigid. So that way, you're carrying around something a little bit sturdier.
You can like move people out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, more just so that your items don't crush into each other as you're holding them. But anyways, I couldn't, they were too heavy and they were too awkward, and I didn't want them like smushed up against each other and scratching and things like that. And I didn't bring enough money in for this because I had some other things too that I had piled up. So I'm like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take them here. I'm going to pay what I can. I think I paid like half of it up front, and I bought them, and I went out to my car, got the rest of the money, and came back, which I don't know why I didn't have all of my money. Some of it was still in the car from when I went to the bank. But there were people surrounding me the whole time I'm buying them and leaving, and they were trying to like hawk them and take them from me. And I wasn't like in that room instantly as soon as the place opened. Like it was probably like 15, 20 minutes before I got into that room.
Yeah.
Nobody else saw them, but once I had like pulled them out from underneath the table and got them, oh my goodness, people were going after them. So you've got to guard your stuff. You got to protect it. Even if that means paying for, and I've done this at other places too, going and paying for those items right away. And then that way, if you need to, because I couldn't carry them all to my car at once, I had to make like 2 trips. That way they can be put behind the table and then you can do the rest of your shopping later. But don't try and, because if I had to set them down somewhere, somebody would have probably snagged them. So
no, I just
protect your items.
I had Dixon flannels. Remember the haul that I had like 24 of them? All 24 Dixon flannels. Like I was just like, I'm buying these now. I'm going to put them in my car because you never know, right? Yeah. You might put it on the reserve table
and then someone could still take it. Yeah. The worker, especially if they're volunteers, goes and takes a break and somebody else is like, oh yeah, you know, they're sure these are for sale. So protect your items, do whatever you have to do, get them to your car as soon as you can, and then go finish shopping if you need to. Long story short, I was able to sell all 3 of them. 2 of the cameras worked. I had to buy a separate battery for them because they didn't have batteries. So I had to pay like $25 for a battery, wait for it to come from, you know, Amazon. It was like a cheap Chinese knockoff brand one, but it was fine because I could test the cameras. And I had to buy a little, video thing too. One of the cameras didn't work, but I sold that lens for like 100 and something. And then the rest of the cameras I sold for, I want to say it was like $450 for one of them and like $550 for the other one. And then, wow. It was well over 100 for the lens. So I just for a simple, easy thing, it wasn't too much. And still, I'm not a huge fan of testing electronics, but every once in a while, it's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. And again, we've always said this, if there's a certain niche that right? Like, cameras, right? It doesn't hurt to venture off into that because you have more knowledge than most people. Like I would have looked at those cameras and I probably would have looked them up, but they wouldn't have been my go-to. Like I said, I don't even know how far into the room I would have walked into.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I was like hovering over them. As soon as I saw that red rim that I was like, ooh, those are expensive lenses.
There you go. Now, you guys are probably listening and going, hey, we've heard somebody's story. And so this is the highlights, right? So we're trying to give you an extended version and kind of the lessons we learned, because this one I'm sharing here, to this day, I'm still in shock about what happened. This happened back in, I want to say it was March or April, and it was 9:30 in the morning. And it was an okay morning. I already made a score. I already picked up some items on garage sales. And I go to this estate sale and there's a ton of people everywhere. Now, my first giveaway is whenever it's not a company running an estate sale, I will spend as much time as I can in that home. The reason being is most of the items, no one's looked at them, right? They're just trying to offload stuff. They're trying to move it. There has been times where I've gone and the family is very, they're very picky about their prices, but generally they're just like, we just want to move everything out. We want to sell the house. So I show up and I see this plastic bin, a clear one, of just junk toys, just a bunch of junk toys. But in it, I see some Star Wars stuff. I see some Hot Wheels, some vintage Hot Wheels stuff. And I'm like, all right, this could be worth it. So I just pick it up. And it's interesting because there are 5 other resellers, right? So this is another thing. If you see a bunch of resellers already in an area, that doesn't mean that they have picked up everything valuable. Can't tell you how many times things get missed. So I picked those up. But then here's where the major money was. There was money in that one, but there was money in, there was a bunch of boxes. And I asked the owner, I said, hey, what are these? And she said, oh, they're just clothes. We're giving those away for free. I was like, oh, all right.
Can't be free.
And I can't be free, but you also got to be careful, because how many times have you picked up free stuff and it's more of a hassle to pick up because it just sits at your house, and then you're like, it's not worth the listing. But I started going through all of it, and I found, I don't remember how many it was. It was at least 8 vintage Pendleton shirts. And half of those were new with tags. No moth bites. Everything was clean. Remember, this is 9:30 in the morning. So I picked those up, and then, I go to pay, and I said, how much for the clothing? And she's like, I told you it was free. I'm like, all right. And so not only did I pick up some Pendleton, I picked up some vintage Tommy Hilfiger. I picked up some other vintage items. All those Pendletons at the least sold for $50. 2 or 3 of them sold for about $100 a piece. So I'm already, you know, making $300 to $400 profit on just those shirts. And then there was that junk bin, which I was regretting picking it up. And so I've just let it sit. I let it sit in a pile. It was there for, I want to say, about at least a month. And then, you know those moments where you're like, let me just look through this and see if there's anything valuable. And then what did I notice? I noticed there was a G.I. Joe Abominable Snowman from the 70s that I couldn't identify, but luckily in the Discord, somebody recognized it. And that one sold for $50 plus ship. Then there was a X-Wing windshield, and that sold for $30 plus ship. Then there were a bunch of Star Wars figures. Some sold for $30. Some were headless and sold for $12. I mean, they all sold. And on top of that, there was a mini bag that I picked up on the way out. It was just like a sandwich bag full of just like pieces of He-Man toys. And I've shared this before. I sold a pair of Skeletor's loincloths for $20 plus shipping. Actually, today I just had a sale. I sold a He-Man gun. It was only $6 plus shipping, but
He-Man use guns?
Yeah,
it's a sword guy.
No, it's like a little red gun.
Oh, okay.
So obviously it was right because the collector bought it. So I know it's not out. But overall, that haul in itself, easy $1,000 when everything was done. And so again, don't get discouraged. You might have had those moments where you show up early and you don't find anything. You're going. And then there's that estate sale. And it's, 10 in the morning. I've even had scores at 11 in the morning. And you just never know. You never know. I honestly believe with the boxes of clothes outside, I think most people, since it was free and it was in boxes, they just thought it was junk. They're like, I'm not going to go through this. And so ended up being a huge score. So the lesson was just keep going.
Keep going. That's good. All right. My next one came from, like I said, I didn't go to a lot. I didn't do as much garage sales and thrift stores as I would have liked this year. I'm hoping to do a little bit more 2023, especially the last half of 2023. But one of the days that I went to, there was like it wouldn't be like a church rummage sale. It was like a woman's club thing. And I scored super big on it. And that same trip out, I found a guy who was like a random garage sale. Like, one of the morals of the story is sometimes when it's not on your route, that's when you want to stop. So, because I had a route and I stopped and I scored really big at one and I was going to another one that looked really good, but you see that random garage sale along the way. I'm like, it's just, there's an arrow pointing. I bet it's real close. So I just drove down the street, found it, and I didn't see anything that seemed profitable. But then I went in, I pulled up and I'm looking around and I find an outdoor like power timer switch thing that has got to be like hardwired into the house that you would use for, I'm assuming, lighting or sprinklers or things like that, some kind of outdoor power supply system. And I asked the guy how much, and he's like, I don't know. What do you think? And I was like, $2. And he's like, sure, why not? Well, I had known that this type of stuff is very valuable, primarily because, over the whole 2020 incident, Home Depot did really, really well, but they were running out a lot of things. And so I actually have a friend who is pretty high up in Home Depot. So we were talking about things that were valuable and things they couldn't keep on the shelf. And as soon as things come in, they're gone. And certain things, especially when it comes to stuff like that, people want the specific model that they had before because it's already, the wiring is set up for it. Everything is good to go. And I looked this one up and they're going for over $150 used and without certain parts. Mine was technically, I think, new, but open because it still had like all of the inserts and stuff inside. So I had no way of testing it. And that's when you almost have to take a little bit of a gamble because this looks new. But I have really no way of testing it. So worst thing happens is you list it. And then if somebody says it doesn't work, then you do the return.
But that's the beauty of having a lot of sales. Right. And offering returns.
That's right. And so I ended up selling it for, I wanted to say it was like $185 or something like that. So for $2 to $185 for something that was in a box that most people would just pass right by. I mean, it was like, think it's like a yellow looking, almost like those power boxes that go on the outside of houses. Yeah. Like that are on like the walls, just something that looks like that, kind of like an off yellow looking. And all I did was open it up, see that there was some packaging and the model number was in there. So I looked it up and before I even asked the guy how much, which, he gave me a good price. I didn't even negotiate. But I saw that they were going for over $150. And so it was an easy, sure, $2. And that's one of the reasons why you don't give the first number on something, is because if you see something super valuable, and, you know, when I first started, I would have said, you know, oh, would you take 60 for this? You know, because, you know, I'm going to sell it for 150. But when you ask them, he was probably just going to take it and throw it away after, you know, if it didn't sell, and it was just in a box of random junk. So, hey, how much? And he told me to, and I was happy with it.
And I'm pretty sure he knew the value of it.
I mean, he probably paid quite a bit for it, but it's one of those things where he probably bought it and it was the wrong one. He forgot to take it back, and, you know, it ends up in a box, and who knows? I mean, some people, that kind of stuff isn't a big deal to them, buying things like that. And so they're not hurting for the money, and he was happy to just be rid of it.
The only reason I bring that up, I've seen some people argue about negotiating and saying, well, if it's somebody that knows the value of what they have, you know, asking them to produce the first price is a bad idea. And I would say that's completely wrong, in the sense that you what it allows you to do is get a feel for what they're looking for, right? If the guy had said $60, then you're like, all right, I know this is something I don't want to deal with. But I can't tell you how many times people know, and they'll even tell you, like, at the end, they're like, I know I gave you a good deal on that. And you just smile and go, I know, I appreciate it. And you move on, right? So yeah, agreed. That was a good one. Did you talk about that before?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
I've sold other things like that. A lot of times, even just the boxes that like hold they're like metal, like you open them up and they have holes in the back. Those can do really, really well, because again, people have certain sizes they need, there are certain specs for their house. And so they'll buy those no problem used. And if you've got, I mean, the right size one, the right model, sometimes they have a few wires coming in. They're already pre-wired for certain things. Yeah, I typically, whenever I find those, I'm able to pick them up relatively inexpensive, and they sell for quite a bit. Normally, I don't sell them this high. Like if it's just like a box, they tend to go for like $50 to $60 depending on what it is. But for one to go for 100, I think 188 or something like that is what it. Yeah, is a steal.
Hey, real quick, you had heard us mention about the Discord, and if you haven't had a chance yet, everyone in our Discord, I said most, everyone in our Discord. There was a most, and then eventually got eliminated with the people that hacked their way into our Discord. But everyone that's on our Discord is a Patreon member. The Discord is a benefit of supporting us. And so, for example, you know, things take time. Making these episodes, especially right now, takes time away during this holiday season from our families. But we really want to produce this content. And every single time someone signs up for that Patreon membership, it helps us out. And it's only $5.55 a month for the bottom tier. And, you know, it does great things for us. It allows us to get equipment if equipment breaks. It allows us to spend time away from our businesses to continue to create content for free for everyone. And so we appreciate all of you. And then when you sign up for that Patreon, you do get that Discord link. And so if you haven't yet, go to patreon.com/PRSO podcast, or go to the link below, sign up for Patreon and help us out there. And really appreciate all your support.
Yeah.
All right. So this is still a crazy one. I don't know if I'll ever be able to top this one, because it just shouldn't have happened. So a few months back, I think this was in the summer, I'm going through, you know, local marketplaces, and somebody has two Nintendo consoles, the NES, the original version, and it said free, just trying to get rid of these. And I thought it was just a scam, you know, because everything's scammy now in the local marketplaces. So I messaged them. I was like, hey, I'm interested in these consoles. Nobody has contacted you. Here's my phone number. Give me a call. 30 minutes later, I get this older gentleman, and, you know, he calls me and he's like, you're first on the list. You're the first to contact. I'm like, wait, what? Because you know, you can look like on certain marketplaces, they'll tell you how long it's been posted, how many hours. It was like 3 hours. And maybe people thought it was a scam. Maybe people didn't notice, because I know people have alerts. So he calls me, and I've shared this before. You have to drop whatever you're doing. Like when it's a deal that good, you better bet there's a ton of people that are going to try to maybe even show up early if they could, or going to try to somehow, you know, negotiate a way. They'll tell the person, hey, I know it's for free, but I'll give you $100 or whatever it is. Like people will try. So I told them, hey, I'm 30 minutes away. I'm getting in my car. So I told my son that we're leaving. We went, and we drove out, and it was a very nice part of La Jolla. And so, I totally once I drove into that neighborhood, I'm like, this guy's he's just trying to get rid of stuff. Like, this isn't a scam. So I show up and he pulls out this box, this Chiquita banana box, and it says Nintendo or something. And I'm like, wait a second, this is a box? And he opens up that box, and in the box there are, I want to say 3 to 4 Nintendo consoles. There's 6 NES controllers. There's 2 guns. There's about 10 to 15.
Sorry,
yeah, right there, man.
Swallowed some water wrong.
did you just step out for a moment?
I'm good.
We're pretty cough free on our podcast.
If you hear some coughing in the background, sorry about that.
Well, we're just making up for the years of no coughs.
That's right.
And these 10 or 12 games, that whatever NES games are in there, untouched, all clean, and 2 of them have their cases and manuals. One was a Kid Icarus, and the other was a Super Mario Brothers 3. And I'm just in shock. I'm like, so this is all free? And he's like, yeah, I just want to offload those. And then this is a question you should always ask. I said, hey, do you have any other stuff? And he goes, I was going to go over to I'm going to say the store shall not be named. I was going to go over to Goodwill and drop off a couple more items. And I'm like, oh, let me just take a look. He's like, oh, you don't even want to know what I dropped off yesterday.
Oof.
And,
I hate to hear that.
I hate to hear that. But he pulls out a Lego Technics vintage from, I think it was like late 90s or maybe early 2000s, sealed Lego item. All right. And I looked it up and it was worth $140. He pulls out an old vintage doll, which I didn't know how much it was worth. I'm like, I'll take that. He had some kind of high-end Acura car, and he gave me the steering wheel that they replaced. It was like in a box and everything, already packaged. Like, all I had to do was slap a label and it sold. And then he shares with me his time in the military. He also brings out this old, how can I not remember? Thomas Edison. I had to ask you who invented the light bulb. An old Thomas Edison phonograph. And I said, you're giving this away too? He's like, no, this one I'm keeping. I'm like, all right. And I have books I still haven't listed. I have some vintage books. I just remembered. And I go home and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I would have, at a garage sale, I would have easily paid at the bottom, maybe $200 for all this stuff, maybe more. So right away, all the video games made $500 to $600. The consoles made about $80 to $100 because they weren't working. I mean, I tried, but I got the red light of death. The Italian doll sold. I had to write these down. The Italian doll sold. What I got here? I got it on here. Oh, for $150. The Acura steering wheel sold for $180. Okay, then I had the controllers, and I've held on to the games with the manuals and the boxes just because, I don't know, I just have a hard time parting with those.
Turning into a hoarder.
They're probably worth like $300 a piece, but it was just crazy. So here's the thing. There's a lot of scams out there, but it never hurts to just reach out. If it sounds too good to be true, most of the time it is, but it's that one time that you're going to go, I'm glad I contacted.
That's right.
So, all right, what do you got?
All right, so I'll keep this one kind of short just because we talked about it. I talked about it a little bit last episode, but I guess there's kind of 2 of them that I can kind of throw in here. There's plenty more, but so sharing with my neighbors, some people who lived in the neighborhood I lived in, that I was a reseller, people just knowing, and then them saying, hey, do you want this? And a lot of times I've had people, coworkers, things like that, offer to give me things or sell me things. And most of the time it's junk. Occasionally it's something that's worthwhile. I've had people drop stuff off at my door. Hey, I was going to take this stuff to Goodwill. I'm going to put it at your house. And if you want it, you can have it. If not, take it to Goodwill. So sometimes I'm like the middleman for people for Goodwill, which can pay off. But the fact that I had some neighbors who gave me some horse fencing, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make a killing on this. I remember this. Yeah. Now it's really cool because just telling them that I was a reseller, and then another one, recently I had another person reach out to me that I told I was a reseller based off of a deal I made with them with some board games. And again, just kind of like that guy where it's like more and more comes. Like every so often I get an offer up message like, hey, I got some more stuff. And
I love it when that happens.
Sweet. But yeah, just telling people you're a reseller, a lot of times it pays off. So I got these horse pins for free. There's like 15 of them. And what's really cool is one of our listeners who's on our Discord heard the story. They watched the last episode. And so they messaged me on the Discord and they're like, hey, just so you know, and I think this was Janice. She goes, just so you know, I'm huge into horses, love the podcast. When you list it, make sure to use these keywords. And then she told me like use round pin and some other stuff. And so just having that like
That's great
community.
info.
So again, knowing that you've got, telling people you're a reseller and then having a community of resellers, like both of those things are going to make this sell so much more. And, you know, she said these things sell really fast. People picked up the used ones. So just getting that encouragement too, like not only just like, here's a good keyword to use, but also just so you know, this is going to sell really fast. So just getting that encouragement, having that community of people who are resellers, and then having a community of people who aren't resellers, but that know you are, it's going to pay off. And over your years of reselling, if you've been afraid of telling people you're a reseller, I'm telling you, don't be afraid. Let people know you're a reseller, even if you're negotiating. Sometimes there's been a handful of times where I've not disclosed that information. But most of the time,
very rare. Most
of the time, it's not a big deal. Sometimes it doesn't come up just because it's not worth it. Like,
yeah,
I'm just doing a negotiation, so I'm not going to be like, oh, by the way, I'm a reseller. But the times where it's like, oh, I can make a connection here, it's probably only hurt me like one time. So not a big deal. But yeah, so let people know, let your friends and family know, let your neighbors know. And next thing you know, you'll have people dropping stuff off at your porch saying, I was going to take this to Goodwill. You can take a look at it. And you sometimes score.
I mean, it just reminds me of, and you haven't done this in a while, but there was a time that you even had an ad on Craigslist and you had tons of people inquiring, right? And so that's, I mean, I see it all the time. And I also look at them because I'm like, that's my competition. But again, communicating, you would think people would go like, oh, I'm going to charge them more. I've never had that happen to me. I've had people kind of say, no, I'd rather, you know, I had one person say, I'd rather donate this to somebody that needs it. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. Understood. You know, my family doesn't need profits, but you know, but it doesn't hurt. I mean, it is 99.9999% valuable for you to share that you're a reseller. All right. So this last one here, this was, it's one of those things you don't know how to pay someone back. And this is one of those, because I did not know how big this was going to be. So, you know, I'm part of this community and I teach homeschool, and one of the families reached out and said, hey, you know, we have a relative. They're trying to offload a lot of inventory. I know you sell on eBay, and I give them your name. Is that okay? I'm like, sure, that's fine. Again, share it. I was a reseller. I never even tried to. It's not like I go in and go, hey, everyone, I'm Pure as a podcast. I'm here to resell. No, I don't share it. And usually it's somebody comes across our YouTube or somehow they find out about it. So they messaged, you know, this relative, and they contacted me, and it took a long time. It was like in January, I think we spoke, and they're like, hey, we have this. And their brother, I believe, was also a reseller. And so I was kind of hesitating because I'm like, all right, I don't know if they're going to give me a good deal, but that's okay. You know, I'm willing to check it out. And they just got really busy, and I didn't hear from them for 5 or 6 months. Then out of the blue, I get this text like, hey, we're finally ready to offload some of this inventory. Let's set up a day. So I show up. I drive a couple hours up to LA, and it's a house full of stuff. Now, the difficulty with a house full of stuff is, you know, how much time do you want to spend looking through stuff? But the very first thing I saw was a box, and the box said Hot Wheels. And I was like, that looks kind of like an older box. And I look, and the very first car I pulled out was a vintage Hot Wheels Redline. And right away, I knew this is going to be good. I don't know how good. So the crazy part is they just said, hey, go throughout the house and pick out, you know, whatever you want to pick up. And I said, and I asked them before, I said, what do you want to do? Are you looking to sell this stuff? Are you looking for consignment? And initially they said consignment. But I was very upfront with them, and I said, listen, I don't really do consignment. It's just, it's not my thing. It's hard putting in the work and then storing the stuff and then not knowing if it'll sell. I said, I'd rather just buy it all. And they're like, all right, that's fine. Just go and pick up stuff. So I picked up, you know, what I thought was valuable. And then they said, how about you take this? How about you take this? And I'm like, I don't know if I can pay you guys for all this. And they said, no, don't worry about it. Just we'll make a deal. And sure enough, it's this huge, it's my whole, Honda Pilot full of stuff. And I said, okay, so how much for everything? And they said, well, what are you thinking? I'm like, I don't know. It's just kind of uncomfortable. Like, you guys know me. You're not just a random stranger. Like, I don't want to, be awkward about things. And he said, treat us like you don't know us. And I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah. So I gave him a number not knowing exactly everything. Because this was, I had sold some red lines before from a huge haul a few months before, but I really didn't know how much there was in there. And I didn't know about all the stuff. So I said, how about $200? And he looks at me and goes, how about $150? And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do $150. I can't negotiate, that. And sure enough, he just said, he's like, hey, listen, we just want to help you out. We appreciate you coming up. This is fine. And they helped me pack up the car. And it's crazy the stuff that sold. So here's some of the items that sold. The red lines, probably 1K. Easy 1K. Easy. That's super conservative. I sold a Mad magazine, like it was a Arthur Newman, like a scale model thing. And that sold for $300. I sold some Matt Mason figures, vintage toys, another $300. I sold some Matchbox Lesney cars, about $500. I sold some vintage mid-century Sunbeam kind of like attachments to a kitchen, and those sold for another $500 to $600. Sold another Pendleton for $100. Sold, I don't even know. I mean, it's easily multiple K that I made from that investment. That was the first trip. I made 2 trips, and then the other trip, there were more things that I picked up, and I still have stuff of theirs that I picked up that they were just like, just take it, just take it, just take it. And, the only downside is when you take a lot of stuff, there's a lot of stuff that you pick up that you don't want to list, or B, it's not that valuable or not your niche. And so that's why I haven't listed some of those items. But I am so eternally grateful to that family. Again, like Mike said earlier, it never hurts to share that you're a reseller. And again, if people are wanting to help you out, like there is that guilt, but you just got to let that, people have that unmerited favor towards you, and they just want to help you out because they care about you, and you just got to let people love on you. And it was great. It was the middle of the summer. It's what I needed because, things were interesting in the beginning of summer. And so it was good. So I'm sure many of you have stories. If you want to take the time and type a quick snippet in the comments, let us know about, what were some highlights of
the highlight of
2022 for you, and also what you learned. Love to hear that. And appreciate every single one of you tuning in during this holiday season. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Late.
Peace.